Woman is kicked out of her house by her millionaire husband and mother-in-law. Years later, they are shocked to see her rich. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Samantha had always felt like an outsider in the mansion she once called home. Married to Jason, the heir to an immense fortune, she thought her life would be filled with love and luxury. But she quickly realized that her role in the family was strictly defined by her mother-in-law, Margaret. From the moment Samantha walked down the aisle, Margaret treated her with disdain. Nothing Samantha did was good enough for the powerful matriarch who had built the family's wealth through ruthless business dealings. Margaret's controlling nature became unbearable. She dictated every aspect of Samantha's life, from how she should dress to whom she could speak with at family events. Jason, always more loyal to his mother than to his wife, remained silent. As months turned into years, Samantha felt suffocated in a marriage where love and partnership were mere illusions. She had no family to fall back on. Her parents had passed away, and her friends had drifted, intimidated by her new status in high society. Then came the day that would change her life forever. After years of simmering tension, Margaret confronted Samantha during a family dinner. With Jason silently sitting beside his mother, Margaret accused Samantha of being nothing more than a gold digger who had never belonged in their world. "You've brought nothing to this family," Margaret hissed. "You're a leech, and it's time you were cut off." Stunned, Samantha turned to Jason, expecting him to defend her. But he simply looked away. That was all the confirmation Margaret needed. "Get out," she demanded. "You're no longer welcome here. The marriage is over." Samantha felt the weight of the world crashing down on her. With no money of her own, no job, and no home to return to, she was left with nothing but the clothes on her back. Jason offered no support as she packed her bags. The divorce papers were already drawn up, ready to sever the last tie between her and the family she had tried so hard to fit into. With her heart broken and her spirit shattered, Samantha left the mansion that had once seemed like a fairy tale and stepped into a world she had long forgotten. The real world, where money and status didn't shield her from the harshness of life. The first few months were agonizing. She stayed with an old college friend, trying to figure out how to rebuild her life. Jobs were hard to come by, especially for someone who had no recent work experience and was constantly associated with the scandal of her divorce. Jason and Margaret's connections ensured that no one in their social circle would offer Samantha a helping hand. But Samantha wasn't one to stay down for long. Slowly, she picked herself up. She found a job as an assistant at a small marketing firm, far from the glittering high society she once knew. The work was hard and the pay was modest, but it was hers. For the first time in years, Samantha felt in control of her life. She rented a tiny apartment and began to rebuild, piece by piece. What she lacked in financial resources, she made up for with determination. Every day was a step further from the life she had once known and the people who had abandoned her. Meanwhile, the world of wealth and power continued without her. Or so it seemed. Samantha occasionally heard rumors about Jason and Margaret, but she distanced herself from that part of her life. She was done with them. Years passed, and Samantha found her footing. She rose through the ranks at her firm, proving herself as a sharp, innovative businesswoman. Eventually, she started her own small marketing agency, which grew steadily with each passing year. By her own hand, she carved out a life far removed from the shadows of her former in-laws. One evening, Samantha was scrolling through her emails when she received an unexpected invitation. A large, well-known company in the city was hosting an exclusive gala for potential investors, looking for people interested in expanding their operations. As she glanced over the invite, her heart skipped a beat. It was Jason's family company, and the person who had sent the invitation was none other than Margaret herself. Samantha's first instinct was to delete the email and pretend she had never seen it. After all, she owed these people nothing. But a part of her, the part still scarred from the pain they had caused, wanted to see what had become of them. They had once held all the power, throwing her out as though she was nothing. But now they were the ones in need. Curiosity got the better of her, and Samantha decided to attend the gala. She had built a new life, one that stood independently from the toxic environment she had once been part of. She had nothing to prove to anyone, least of all Jason or Margaret. But there was something alluring about the idea of facing them again, now that the tables had turned. The night of the gala, Samantha dressed in an elegant but understated gown. As she entered the grand ballroom, she was struck by how little had changed. The same glittering chandeliers, the same high society elites, and the same sense of superiority lingered in the air. But she was no longer the timid, uncertain woman who had once stood at the edges of these gatherings, terrified of saying the wrong thing. She scanned the room and then she saw them. Jason and Margaret standing by the bar, speaking with a group of potential investors. Samantha observed them for a few minutes, unnoticed, and was shocked by what she saw. They looked different. Jason's once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by nervous energy as he tried to engage with the investors. Margaret, who had once commanded any room she walked into, seemed smaller somehow. Her face lined with stress, her posture less imposing. Samantha walked up to them, her heart pounding. Jason looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. For a moment, there was silence as the three of them stood face to face for the first time in years. Samantha stood in front of Jason and Margaret, their gazes locked in disbelief. The years had been kind to Samantha. Her confidence radiated from within, while Jason and Margaret, once pillars of arrogance, seemed diminished. Samantha could see the wear of time and stress etched on their faces. Jason was the first to speak, his voice hesitant. "Samantha, I didn't expect to see you here." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure you didn't. Imagine my surprise when I received an invitation from your company, of all places." Margaret, always quick with her biting remarks, interjected. "We're expanding and we're looking for serious investors, people with business acumen, not just opportunists." Samantha's eyes narrowed. "Opportunists. I think you know a little something about that, Margaret. After all, I was the one cast out without a second thought, wasn't I?" Jason shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if seeking an escape from the conversation. Margaret, however, wasn't about to back down. "You weren't fit for our family, Samantha. You never were. You never had the class, the sophistication, or the understanding of how things work in our world." Samantha felt the familiar sting of Margaret's cruelty, but she wasn't the same woman she had been all those years ago. She met Margaret's gaze head-on, her voice steady. "And yet here we are, Margaret. Your world seems a little smaller these days, doesn't it?" Margaret's face flushed with anger, but Jason raised a hand to silence her. His voice was low, almost pleading. "Look, Samantha, things have changed. The company, we've been struggling." Samantha's heart raced as Jason's admission hung in the air. Struggling. The once invincible empire that had cast her aside was on shaky ground. She had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it directly from Jason was a shock. "We're looking for investors because we've had some setbacks," Jason continued, choosing his words carefully. "A few bad deals, some market shifts. Things we didn't anticipate. We're trying to turn things around, but we could really use some help. We're reaching out to potential partners to help stabilize the company." Margaret's face tightened as Jason spoke, clearly disliking the vulnerability he was showing. But there was no denying the truth. This wasn't a power play on their part. They were desperate. Samantha crossed her arms, taking a moment to absorb what Jason was saying. It was almost surreal. The same people who had treated her like an outsider were now scrambling for help to save their fortune. And they had no idea who they were speaking to. "Why me?" Samantha asked, her tone sharper than before. "Why invite someone like me to a gala like this? You could have reached out to anyone else with more money and more connections. Why me?" Jason hesitated, exchanging a glance with Margaret. It was clear they hadn't anticipated this line of questioning. "Honestly, we didn't know you would be here," Jason admitted. "We sent out hundreds of invitations. It's a big event, and we're hoping to attract as many potential investors as possible. It's not like we knew you would be one of them." Samantha couldn't help but let out a small, incredulous laugh. "So, I'm just another name on a list then. You didn't even realize the woman you cast aside could now be one of your potential saviors. The realization dawned on both Jason and Margaret at the same time. Their eyes widened as they understood the full weight of the situation. Samantha wasn't just a guest at the gala. She was here as a serious businesswoman, someone with the power to decide their fate. The tables had turned, and now they were at her mercy. Margaret, always quick to recover, tried to regain some control of the conversation. Well, whatever history we had, it's in the past. This is about business. We're offering a great opportunity here, Samantha. It could be mutually beneficial. Samantha stared at her, her mind racing with the irony of it all. The same woman who had thrown her out like trash was now asking her to invest in the very empire that had been built on cruelty and greed. She felt a surge of satisfaction but also a deep sense of justice. This moment had been a long time coming. Is that so? Samantha said, her voice cold. You think I would just forget everything? That I'd ignore how you treated me like I was beneath you? How you made sure I left with nothing? Jason looked uncomfortable, clearly wishing he could disappear. Samantha, things were complicated back then. We didn't handle it well, I admit that. But we can't change the past. All we can do is move forward. Samantha shook her head. It's not that simple, Jason. You didn't just break a marriage. You broke a person. You both treated me like I was worthless. And now you come to me for help. Margaret scoffed. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Samantha. This is business. People move on. You've clearly done well for yourself, haven't you? Samantha's heart pounded in her chest. She had done well, but not because of them. She had clawed her way back from the brink, rebuilt her life from nothing, and now, here she was, standing in front of the very people who had tried to destroy her. The power dynamic had shifted, and they knew it. Maybe I have, Samantha replied, her voice measured. But I didn't do it by stepping on people, or by throwing others out when they no longer served my purposes. Jason stepped closer, his expression almost pleading. Samantha, we're in trouble. We've lost most of what we had, and if we don't get the support we need, the company's going to go under. Margaret and we're not what we used to be. We can't do this alone. Samantha studied him, weighing her options. A part of her relished the idea of leaving them to fend for themselves, to watch as everything they had built crumbled into dust. But another part of her, one that still remembered the woman she had once been, knew that revenge wasn't what she wanted. Not truly. She stepped back, her gaze never leaving Jason's. I'll think about it, she said, her voice soft but firm. But don't expect any favors. If I do help, it will be on my terms. Margaret opened her mouth to speak, but Samantha didn't wait to hear what she had to say. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the two of them standing there, stunned and silent. As she made her way through the crowd, Samantha's mind was swirling. The power to save them was in her hands, but the question was, did they deserve it? The gala ended, but Samantha's thoughts continued to race long into the night. The weight of the decision she had to make pressed down on her. Jason and Margaret had taken everything from her once, but now, by some strange twist of fate, she held the power to determine their future. She couldn't shake the irony of it all, and though the desire for revenge tempted her, she wasn't sure if that was who she wanted to be. In the days that followed, Samantha threw herself into her work, trying to distract herself from the swirling emotions the encounter had stirred. Her marketing agency was thriving, expanding into new markets, and her reputation as a savvy businesswoman had earned her respect in circles she once would have never imagined. She had moved on, or so she thought, but Jason and Margaret's desperation had dredged up old wounds she wasn't sure had ever fully healed. Then, one afternoon, as Samantha was wrapping up a meeting, she received a call from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello," she said, unsure of who might be on the other end. "Samantha, it's Jason." His voice was quiet, almost defeated. Samantha's heart skipped a beat, but she remained calm. "Jason, what do you want?" "Hey, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please, can we meet?" Samantha hesitated. She had been trying to keep her distance, to make a clear decision without being influenced by emotions. But something in Jason's voice was different this time, less prideful, more sincere. "Fine," she replied, "but make it quick. I'm busy." They agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, far removed from the glitz and glamour of the elite circles Jason used to move in. When Samantha arrived, she spotted him immediately. He was seated at a corner table, looking tired and worn down. This was a far cry from the confident, polished man she had once known. Jason looked up as she approached, his eyes filled with something that resembled regret. Samantha sat across from him, crossing her arms as she waited for him to speak. "Samantha," he began, "I know I don't deserve your time or your help. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, especially when it comes to you." Samantha raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. She had heard apologies before, and most of them rang hollow. But there was something different about this one. "After you left," Jason continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "things changed. I didn't realize it at the time, but Margaret's control over me, it was suffocating. She manipulated me, made me believe that you were the problem, that you were the reason everything was going wrong. But after you were gone, I saw the truth. She used me, just like she used everyone else in her life, to build her empire." Samantha remained silent, her eyes locked on his. It was clear that Jason was unraveling, the years of pressure and control finally breaking him down. "She destroyed everything," Jason said, his voice trembling. "Not just the company but my life. I let her, and I was too weak to stop it. Now we've lost almost everything. We're drowning in debt, and I don't know how to get out." Samantha could see the raw emotion in Jason's eyes, the vulnerability he had never shown her during their marriage. For the first time, he wasn't hiding behind his mother's power or his wealth. He was just a broken man, desperate for a lifeline. "And Margaret?" Samantha asked, her tone sharper than she intended. Jason looked down at the table, ashamed. "She's sick. Cancer. She's been fighting it for the last year, but it's aggressive. She's not the woman she once was." Samantha's heart clenched. Margaret, the woman who had treated her so cruelly, was now battling for her life. It was almost too much to process. "And you think I should care?" Samantha said, her voice cold but trembling slightly with the weight of the revelation. Jason shook his head. "Oh, I don't expect you to. After everything we did to you, I wouldn't blame you if you walked away and never looked back. But I'm asking because I don't know where else to turn." Samantha felt a storm of emotions swirling inside her. Anger, sadness, disbelief. But most of all, she felt an overwhelming sense of power. The same people who had cast her aside were now at her mercy. But what would she do with that power? She stood up from the table, staring down at Jason. "You made your choices, Jason. You chose to side with Margaret. You chose to throw me out like I was nothing. Now you have to live with the consequences of those choices." Jason looked up at her, his eyes pleading. "No. And I regret it every day. But please, if there's any part of you that can forgive me, I'm begging you. Help me." Samantha's hands clenched at her sides. She had spent years dreaming of this moment, of being the one in control, of making them feel the same helplessness she had felt. But now that it was here, it didn't feel as satisfying as she thought it would. She turned and walked toward the door, her heart racing. But before she reached it, she stopped, a thought running through her mind. She turned back to Jason, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "I'll help you," she said. "But only under one condition." Jason's eyes lit up with hope, but Samantha quickly crushed any expectation of an easy fix. "I take over the company," she said. "Completely. You and Margaret step aside, and I'll rebuild it on my terms." Jason blinked, stunned by the boldness of her demand. "You want control?" "Yes. I'm not going to be some silent partner bailing you out. If I'm going to save this company, it's going to be mine." Jason stared at her, struggling to process the gravity of her offer. If he agreed, it would mean handing over everything, the company, the legacy his family had built, the last shred of power he had. I'll have to talk to Margaret, he stammered. Samantha shook her head. There's no discussion. You either agree now, or I walk out that door and I don't look back. Jason swallowed hard, his entire body tense. After a long, agonizing pause, he nodded. "'Kay. It's yours." Samantha turned and left the cafe without another word, her heart pounding as she stepped out into the cold evening air. The decision was made. The tables had turned. A week later, Samantha stood in her new office, the same office that had once belonged to Margaret. The company was now hers, and she was already making plans to turn it around. But there was one last thing she needed to do. She called Jason and Margaret to her office. They arrived together, Jason supporting his frail mother as they entered the room. Margaret, once the powerful matriarch, now looked small and fragile, her illness having taken its toll. Samantha sat behind the desk, her eyes cold and unyielding. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice steady. "I've known about the company's troubles for a while." Jason and Margaret exchanged confused glances. "You see, I've been watching from the sidelines. And when I saw the cracks forming, I made some moves of my own." Margaret narrowed her eyes, but before she could speak, Samantha continued. "I've been quietly acquiring shares in your company for the past 2 years. I now own 51% of it." The color drained from both Jason and Margaret's faces. The company had already been hers before they had even asked for help. "I didn't need you to hand it over," Samantha said, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "I already had control. You just didn't know it." And with that, Samantha stood, the weight of her triumph settling in. The company, her future, her destiny, everything was in her hands now. The tables had well and truly turned. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.